go ahead and get this started. So good afternoon, everybody. You are in Women in Tech, and this is an event sponsored by Arbor Spark through its a2Tech360 event series. Good afternoon. Grab your lunch, grab a beverage, take a big big breath, and enjoy. Before I begin, I wanted to share and thank DaySmart for starting this event. This is an annual thing. And a special shout out to Brock for passing the torch. He's been moderating previously, and today he passes the torch to me, and I'm excited to represent him today. Hopefully I make you proud. Okay, so today we will be talking about women in tech. But first I kind of wanted to give some of the background, women in tech. So as far as tech, what is tech? Lots of people, when I say, I'm not, when I ask, are you in tech? They give me back, I'm not in tech. I don't do startups. I do research at a bench. But I want to bring a moment of clarification. Tech is an idea. It's knowledge about something. It's a problem. It's an idea. And when you whisk in some of your mental energy and some of your physical energy, you create tools, machines, algorithms. And what you do with that, you can go solve problems. You can help people. And through this idea, generation creation on the back of a beverage napkin to the point where it becomes possibly a CAD and a device, getting into hospital systems, people making money, people saving money, that's all part of this big, large breadth of tech. So just so you know, there's lots involved with tech and making sure that it's actually doing what it could do and potentially helping the world. Now for the next point, women in tech. Women in tech. It stems actually from STEM. Science, technology, engineering, math. And when I first started thinking about women and how it all got started, at least for my own shoes, I first thought about the moment when I thought about science, technology, and what does it look like? And when I closed my eyes, I envisioned this person at a computer, just coding in their hoodie, listening to Beastie Boys, having a Pepsi or something. And then my attention got turned. And when I saw actually my daughter, she's in virtual school, she's 6 years old, she's also coding right now. I found out millennials and under code now for curriculum, of course, and it snapped for me. I had already just stereotyped what the normal person for me sometimes might look in STEM. And instead, I didn't even think about my daughter who was sitting right next to me. That could be her. It could be her, it could be Pocahontas, it could be Mulan, it could be Frida, it could be the latter RGB, sitting in their sweatpants, coding, drinking a beverage, jamming out. And I have to remember that that stereotype has to kind of go away. There has to be more opportunities. And if I'm going to want my daughter to be in STEM, I got to help start talking to her about what all that means and some of the things that she's going to be faced and challenged with so that she can navigate it for herself. So with that, I kind of wanted to get to the next point of just saying that stereotyping and a lot of these challenges that women do face in tech, they're coming up more, they exist. They're also slowly dying though. And it's up to our generations to make sure that it doesn't get squashed, that we continue to make and rise, not just women, but all people, so that we can all have equality and opportunity. So for the next point, I actually wanted to just share some statistics, some facts, some notes that I found about women in tech. I'm gonna go ahead and start those, and then I'll continue on. In 2020, only 25% of Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft employees are female. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then I kind of read a little bit more, especially in investment. Only 8% of investors are women. Racial minorities are also underrepresented, with 2% of VC investors being Hispanic, and even fewer, less than 1% are Black. But what I found interesting was that venture capital firms increased their proportion of female partners and hires by 10%. And what happened? By doing so, they, on average, by 1.5% spike in overall fund return each year and had 9.7, that's almost 10, more profitable exits. That's impressive, given that about 30% of VC investments have an actual profitable exit. The next point that I also was really astonished about in tech land or startup is that only 30% of tech startups have at least one woman as part of their board or board of directors. But let's consider this next piece. If the Fortune 500 companies with at least 3 women in 3 leading positions saw a 66% increase in ROI, that's a really big wake-up call. By hiring fewer women leaders in a tech company, or just by hiring them, by not hiring females in your tech company, you're actually helping your competitors. But let's be real. Maybe that's why 25.5% of Google's leaders on a global scale are women. Now, taking a step back, when I started thinking about the investment parts again, in 2016, only $1.46 billion were invested in companies with female leads. In terms of how effectively companies turn $1 of investment into $1 of revenue, startups founded and co-founded and led by women are significantly better financial investments. For every dollar of funding, these startups generated 78 cents, while male-founded startups generated less than half of that, just 31 cents. Now let's think about this in a more global perspective, the workforce. Half of the workforce is women. 50% of all professional jobs in the US are held by women. However, in 2018, women only held 25% of US tech jobs. Tech is still a non-traditional pathway for women, actually, when you think about it, and you read more about these stats. 25% of all leadership positions in technology are held by women. That's pretty powerful in itself, and it's continuing to grow, which is phenomenal. But if we think and go back to why it's important to continue to endorse and grow the generations so that they have equal opportunity, this fact actually popped up when I started Googling a little bit more. 75% of girls express a desire in a STEM career, STEM fields. That's great. But the numbers of female undergraduates in computer science, for example, they choose differently, because in 2018, we only had 18% of females who actually ended up choosing that for their career or bachelor choice. Within 2017, we have the numbers of record of showing 25% of professional computing jobs are actually held by women. So there's a lot of change that is still ongoing, and there's still a lot of growth. And then when I dug a little bit more, I started thinking, well, why? Why such trouble? And then I found a couple of different factors. The first one is the lesser wage for the same position, compared especially to men. Unequal growth opportunities with male coworkers, gender bias and derogatory behavior in the workplace, lack of female role models in the same field, and just in general, lack of mentors. So these factors, we can change this. And so with this Women in Tech, I really wanted to just take a moment of saying, hey, yes, we're doing this. It's going to get better. But I also want to give you and empower you with the idea that you can start making changes. Listen to the stories of the wise, the women that I'm going to share with you today. They're going to share their stories, their hardships, their challenges. Take these as pieces of ways to find tools, methods to help grow yourself. But in the future, also, how are you going to help plan and mentor the next generation of people, women, and help them rise so that we can continue to grow wholesomely and our ecosystem? Okay, so those are all my fun little facts into that part. And this next part is actually I'm gonna introduce three phenomenal women who are gonna be joining me today, and they're gonna share their stories. And then after that, we will have a fireside chat where we will go over the questions that you submitted, pre-registrants. Thank you so much, by the way. And also throughout the program, there's a chat box. If you have a question, you can definitely submit your question. And when we get to the fireside chat of the segment, then we can open those up and start answering those questions. So without further ado, I'm actually going to kick off and share with you my own personal story, and then we will slowly introduce to you the other panelists that are joining us today. So bear with me just a second as I share my screen. So this is about me. So I actually didn't share with who I am. My name is Margarita Hernandez. I am Spark's Director of Entrepreneurial Services. But originally, I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas, out on the bay, deep sea fishing with my dad and my sisters. And we moved up to Austin, Texas, where really a lot of my own personal journey started. I was really into science, and I applied to the University of Texas of San Antonio. I was really into microbiology and immunology. And for the most part, when I stop and think about it, yes, I was definitely a student doing and studying really like awesome things. But for the other part is for every day of the week, I had an extracurricular. And that also took up a lot of my time. But it was actually what I enjoyed the most of my undergraduate. I got into chemistry club, and actually my last 2 years of undergraduate, I was chem club president, a little nerdy, yes. But the other parts of it was that I really enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed being able to show younger students, but just kids who are just in elementary school, the power of STEM. These microbes that are moving around, these are how we first started off with the beginnings of antibiotics. Really just being able to share that was something that was really a big piece of me back then, and still is. I also joined a service fraternity, Alpha Phi Omega, and contributed a lot of volunteer hours towards building houses, cooking, teaching, and just really enjoyed a lot of that part of my time in undergraduate. Fungal research was my thing. I was really into mycology, and I wanted to continue to do so. And so I applied to graduate program, and I got into the University of Michigan to start. Right before I did get in, though, my mother also started her PhD program in early childhood development. And we both just kind of started on this huge journey for both of us. And she really endorsed me to just go out there, do better, get educated, because education is the one thing that no one can take from you. So I moved up to Ann Arbor. And when I did, I was in a bit of a culture shock. The first week that I was here, I literally only talked to these men who happened to be Spanish and speak Spanish to me, who were painting the house that I was living in. And that wasn't until I met the other graduate students in the program and the community and began to, have new friendships and fellowship with other people. Graduate school definitely was mind-blowing when it first started. I had lots of imposter syndrome. And as you can see in the picture on the right, when you're a fish, when you start graduate school, at least in some of the labs that I was rotating in, we also celebrated in Halloween. If you're a first year, you're a zombie, and you literally have to dress like a zombie, while the other graduate students got to wear Nerf guns and shoot things at you. It was real fun. The other part of it, though, is in graduate school is that you have to go for your prelims. These are a very important benchmark in your career, where if you don't make this, you are out of graduate school. And so at the time, my mother had actually been diagnosed with leukemia, and things were really challenging for me. We both were going through our prelims and our programs, and she really wanted me to do this before I came home to see her because she was getting more and more sick. So I did it, and I failed miserably. It was really bad. I ended up going home, seeing my mom, saying goodbye to my mom, coming back. And when I came back, though, my professor, the person whose lab that I was currently in at the time, he encouraged me that this was probably not the best thing for me right now. I was going through a lot of different things. And so he wanted me to leave. He told me to go get a master's and reapply when I could. And I actually reached out to 3 really big women at the University of Michigan, Lori Eisem, Laura Olson, and Pamela Raymond. And between the 3 of them, they gave me the strength, the courage, and they were like, we figured out a path of for you to be here if you want to be here. So let us know. I took that opportunity and I continued to push forward. And a few months later, I found Georgi Chankowski and I joined her lab. And within a few months, she had completely turned around my entire science world. And I was thriving and kicking. So thank you so much for those things, ladies. I really appreciate it. I went into studying reproductive sciences and was just very humbled for the second opportunity to restart graduate school and continue on in the program. Because it definitely set me up for some of the next challenges in my life during graduate school. And that is, I had my daughter Aurora a couple of years later, and I really had to get my stuff in gear. And then I defended. There's me defending actually in my cowboy boots. And the next part of my life came in. I essentially started up at FFMI and met some really great team members. They gave me a lot of empowerment and realized that I really like being with teams. From then on, though, I met a lot of these students. And for every one of my students that were in the program that I was working with, there was lots of males versus females. I ended up mentoring many females and many males in the program, but I realized I was in a career surrounded by men. And that was okay, but I spent a lot of time getting to know a lot more about how to navigate certain situations. From there, I took a big jump from FFMI and joined a startup, Pathware. This is us actually pitching at AMIC, team full of males all over again. And at the time, I was traveling a lot, and being a single mom, it just wasn't one of the best things supported for my daughter. So I joined Spark and joined a really great team where I got lots of mentorship and got to meet some really crazy cool people. To end, I just wanted to kind of give some language that my mom gave me when I was faced in challenging times. She always would tell me, "Si se puede," or "yes, you can." And I take that to heart and share it with you. The other part is Frida. And remembering the days when I closed the door after all the chaos of my day, at the end of the day, we can endure much more than we think we can. And I truly do believe that and empower the rest of you to take that with you. So for the next part, I am actually going to introduce the next segment in our show, and that is Ariela Shiganov, Dr. Ariela, for the founder of Artovia Therapeutics, an Ann Arbor-based startup. She's an associate professor in biomedical engineering at the University of Michigan. Her career is dedicated to developing means to restore ovarian reproductive and endocrine function in cancer survivors with premature ovarian insufficiency. She has a long-lasting interest and expertise in the design of follicle microenvironments using biomimetic materials. Let's welcome Ariela.
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I'm touched. Thank you, and I'm so excited to be here today. And I love Frida, by the way. So I am most of all a scientist. I've been in academia forever, and my lab is focusing on developing functional and tunable biomaterials for reproductive tissue engineering, mostly trying to restore lost fertility and ovarian endocrine function in women after cancer treatments or just women experiencing premature ovarian failure. In my lab, we're focusing on building an artificial ovary, also looking into more basic molecular biology that drives folliculogenesis, which is the growth and development of the most basic ovarian functional unit, which is the ovarian follicle. And right now we're also developing ways how to restore endocrine function, and we're moving into non-human primates, monkeys, and also trying to build and prepare all the documentation to go into first-in-human trial. But I will talk about all this later. So over the years, I've been invited to talk at a lot of events, and I kind of built this little list that I think is helpful and kind of summarizes the wisdom I acquired over the years. So you obviously noticed that I have an accent, so I think one of the, and Margarita mentioned it so beautifully and elegantly, I think you need to see role models and really to kind of brush away those stereotypes. So I'm trying to show that being an immigrant shouldn't stop you, and you can go ahead and be successful even if you have an accent when you speak English. So for me, I never stop searching for what inspires me and drives me and excites me, and I think this is what moves me forward. I always try to, so I started with creating and expanding my network, my professional network, but I'm also revisiting it because at different stages of life, you need different people. I always seek supporters and mentors and advocates. It's very important to find people who would go out there and advocate for your work and introduce you and advertise your work so you can get further away. Perseverance and hard work forever. I think this is probably 95% of my success, the other 5 being luck. I encourage everybody around me and myself, first of all, to welcome and accept criticism. It's difficult, obviously, no one likes to hear their faults, but really accepting it, truly accepting it and building on it has been very helpful to me. I don't take things personally, even though sometimes I suspect they are. I think it's important to see beyond that and move beyond that because oftentimes it's not personal. I learned over the years how to manage my time and prioritize what's important and what can be done later. And I always try to be kind. I think kindness will heal and save this world. So I always encourage my students to do the same. So in terms of my journey, right? So I was born in Kiev, Ukraine. It's former Soviet Union, country that doesn't exist anymore. When I was a teenager, my family moved to Israel. So it was my first immigration, right? One wasn't enough. Teenager coming to Israel, not speaking language, it was really tough. I went to school. I got my first degree in pharmaceutical sciences because my parents believed that the girl needs a profession where she can actually support herself. So I became a pharmacist. But then at the end of my first degree, I really didn't know what to do. And I went to graduate school, and I owe a lot to my PhD advisor was Professor Abraham Dome. He was at the university, at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he took me in, despite the fact that I didn't have any research experience. I was a good student, but not, there were better. He took me in. He really encouraged me to move on, and I had a very successful PhD, 6 first author papers, many other as a secondary author. My thesis was on building and developing implantable polymeric devices. But then when I finished my PhD, I still was at crossroads because as good as my PhD advisor was, he wasn't a role model. He was smart and exciting, but he only pushed himself forward. I really couldn't see myself doing what he was doing. I was married by then. I had 2 kids. And my husband's career was the more important one. He was a physician, and he got an invitation to go do a fellowship at the University of Chicago in the United States. So here goes my second immigration. So we came to the United States with 2 kids and a husband who pursues his career. And I was kind of at crossroads. So I applied to a lab at Northwestern University. And at that time, Lonnie Shea and Teresa Woodruff received a huge grant that was aiming to restore fertility in women who experience chemotherapy toxicity to their ovaries. So this team hired me, and they hired me because of the skills that I acquired in my PhD. So they were trying to develop novel biomimetic materials to drive folliculogenesis in vitro, and I was a chemist. I knew how to do this with zero knowledge in reproductive biology. However, this team was incredible. So I finally had a woman who was a role model. And right now, Teresa Woodruff is the newest provost at Michigan State University, if you didn't know. And Lonnie Shea, who was a professor at Northwestern University, later on came and became my boss here. He is the chair of biomedical engineering department here in Michigan. But back then, 2007, I started working, and it was difficult because it was long commute, and I had 2 little kids, and I had to study all over new materials and new biological system, but it was awesome because I had two amazing mentors who really gave me a dream. So I could see myself in Lonnie and I could see myself in Teresa. And eventually it led me to apply to the University of Michigan, which in 2012 was doing a cluster hire for reproductive sciences. So they were looking for someone who does reproductive science engineering, and I think I was the only person in the United States who would fit description of that job. So I applied in 2012. I started my lab, so you can see here we started with a few graduate and undergraduate students, and then over the years my lab grew. I had amazing students, and I was so fortunate to be their mentor. Many of them are already working as PhD group leaders in industry, in pharmaceutical industry and other industries. It was amazing, but starting a lab was tough, right? Because lab, it's like a business. So you have to teach and you have to do research and you have to write grants and you have to bring in a lot of money. So one of the first opportunities that came my way was funding from the Hartwell Foundation. It's a foundation that likes to fund projects that benefit children by inspiring innovation. So I wrote my proposal, restoration of fertility, and I came to them, and it was a very weird interview system where I just stand in front of a group of white men and I talk about follicles and I explain to them why it's important. And this is when they told me, you know what, I think this project is cool. We think this project is cool, but children don't care about fertility and we care about children. If you can change your proposal and actually make it something that's important for children, we will fund you. And I think this was the first moment in my career when I said, maybe I can pivot. So I pivoted. I changed my proposal and they funded me. And it was, I think probably it was the breakthrough in my career because after that funding, I got 2 huge R01s from the NIH and NSF career funding from the National Scientific Foundation. And the way I pivoted it, not that, I made up a problem. There was a problem. I just didn't think about it that way, is girls who have leukemia before puberty, they end up with damaged ovaries, and ovaries are a key component in developing female body. So without the ovaries, these girls don't really grow as well because ovary serves a central role in talking with muscles and bones and adipose tissue and brain. And the only available option for these girls is HRT, which is hormonal replacement therapy developed for women in menopause. So we proposed to build a self-regulating, immuno-isolating device that would allow these girls to get through puberty physiologically, grow, reach their height, and also avoid cardiovascular disease and other problems. So 8 years passed, a lot of grants, a lot of experiments. And when I realized that I've done everything possible in mice and I was reaching so I got tenure and I was reaching my sabbatical year, I said, what's next? And the next, I reached out to University of Michigan Tech Transfer and FFMI, and I told them that I want to build a company. So they paired me with Kate Ramos, who is my mentor in residence, an amazing friend, an amazing woman, and without her, I wouldn't know what to do. And as of March this year, we built this company, and it's a new startup. We're applying for funding, and we're going places. Kate went with me to ICOR workshop, and so we're trying to right now build a device that can be implanted in humans. So this is kind of the story, and I think using all these points, I was able to get where I am right now, and there's still so much to do. So this is the end of it. I would like to introduce the next speaker, MJ Cartwright. She's the CEO of Court Innovation. She has led and built the team to take the Matterhorn online dispute resolution platform from an academic idea at the University of Michigan Law School with founder Professor J.J. Prescott in 2014 to a platform in use by over 110 locations in 17 states across the United States. MJ has an MBA from Eastern University, an electrical engineering degree from the University of Michigan. MJ has applied her engineering and business education, her leadership and relationship building skills to manufacturing, healthcare, and now to justice. And today she will share some of her wisdom, knowledge, and insight with us. Please welcome MJ.
Thank you, Ariella, for that kind introduction. And just a little bit of background, because one of the things, and if you go to the second slide, a lot of this is how you're exposed to opportunities, right? And if we think back to how we're influenced on the next slide, that we're exposed to certain opportunities, and we have to have the confidence and the independence to know that we can actually make a difference. And so I think in terms of this lab, that if you forward the next slide, you will see some of the influencers I've had in my life are male and female. And my dad is an electrical engineer, and he would pull up with his big trucks as he would head out in the field, and I would be able to experience those as a growing, a young kid looking at opportunities. And then we look at the strong teachers that I've had in math and sciences, and even those in the liberal arts and writing, because all of those skills are very important as they come together. And then I think of those spirited, independent leaders, Amelia Earhart, Marie Curie. Those were really independent spirits that knew they could make a difference with that confidence. So those were the influencers of my life and the exposure that really led me, if you go to the next slide, to looking at careers in technologies. And you know, in school, you end up getting off into new areas. You have choices, and one of my choices was to go with a startup in Ann Arbor, and this was dealing with mathematical morphology. And yep, that was the right slide. And with the manufacturing and engineering, and really working with one, you know, how do you build something concrete? Manufacturing had that interest to me. One, how do we make the U.S. more competitive? It was a time when manufacturing needed to be more competitive. Yes, there were very few women in this area, but we were part of that team that led the this particular company, Machine Vision International, to a successful IPO, and was a very exciting time. And then moving that and broadening that exposure into, if we go up a couple slides, in broadening the impact with simulations and animations, and combining education, combining marketing and exposure, and combining technology at the engineering and the manufacturing and the product space. This became pretty important. And as I was working with companies, big and small, international, because strong technologies are all over the world, and also starting many businesses of my own, and pulling in expertise from around the state, around the country, and around the world to actually provide, teaching others how to build in manufacturing, how to test out their processes was pretty exciting. And moving forward, and you'll see a theme here because there's going across industries. And here looking at healthcare and health and wellness, and looking at chronic diseases, and how do you really apply these technologies that come from other industries into the health and wellness space and into the medical space. And you know, I was really fortunate enough to be part of the team that was led by Ted Dacko and Vic Strecker to grow health media, and a successful exit with Johnson & Johnson, working with Dee Eddington to start and grow his company with some very, you know, strong leaders, and leaders that, yeah, you know, we have strong mentors in our lives, and some are men and some are women, and really taking to heart all those lessons as we move forward. And if we look at the next slide, we'll see that where I'm at today, and taking all of that and expanding it even broader, technologies, people, and the business of justice. And to me, this is at such a heart of where we are today as a nation, of increasing access to justice, being able to access judiciary system without having to go into court. And you think about where we exist today with the pandemic, this is critical to our success. And that is an ongoing challenge and excitement for everyone that's part of the Court Innovations Matterhorn team. And we're based right here in Ann Arbor, and leverage and growing the business across the country, which is very exciting. But there's some themes, and I'm just going to mention 3 themes because I want to make sure we have time for Lauren to talk about her experiences, because I think it's incredibly beneficial. But one of the themes is collaboration. And this shows just, you know, that the dynamic of inclusion, problem solving, and listening to the ideas of others, and promoting the ideas, and having someone else's idea bubble to the top. All those things are incredibly important as we move forward as female leaders. And this is a strength of female leadership. Everyone wins when this happens. It's not just that I'm winning and someone else is not winning. If we go to the next slide, the other area of focus for me that I think is very important is mentorship. And as you escalate in your career and you get promoted throughout your career, mentors that really are helping you, and in turn, you are looking to mentor others. And to me, that is a fundamental give-take relationship. And this really exists in the workplace. It exists when you're going after funding. You are looking and working with people that don't always look like you. But at the end of the day, you have to think in terms of how you are going to help others. And the more you're helping others in that mentorship and that path, the more others are going to be helping you as well. And that mentorship aspect has been a very important part of my life and continues to be so. And if we look at the next slide, it's an empty boardroom because I have a couple stories here that are important to me. And, you know, when we look at boardrooms or working out with your board, working with funding to get more capital in your organization, mergers and acquisitions, you're dealing with a very male-dominated environment. And one of the M&A stories when I was presenting, happened to be, the presentation was at a country club, and I was presenting, it happened to be with 15, 20 very talented males. And my first reaction going into the country club is, do they allow women? I mean, it was such a male-dominated environment. But, you know, the senior leadership who really wanted the deal to happen was very supportive and really made the environment quite comfortable considering the circumstances. And we ended up having a successful acquisition with that one. Another example is, you know, when you're actually looking at acquisitions and you're looking at funding opportunities, oftentimes stories will come up about the women in your leadership style, and there'll be questions about that. And, you know, we should always question our leaders. And so looking at, is, you know, MJ a good leader? Is Ariella a good leader? Is Lauren a good leader? And we should look at the qualities of leadership, not just the hearsay that is out on the street. And I was incredibly impressed when we were looking at a funding investor opportunity where the lead investor really did the research and came back with me and said, listen, you are a strong woman leader. And, you know, there's a lot of discussion out there. And what it boils down to is that, yeah, you're going to be able to, you know, drive this business forward, and we're going to be funding it and backing that. So, you know, great story with some great male leadership that really provided some opportunities for me to move forward. And then having the opportunity to work with Bell Capital, Bell Impact, which is a women's fund with women investors looking for women run and owned businesses. Completely different environment, at the same time backing our current organization and helping drive us forward with the help that we need and the mentorship that we need moving forward. And I'd like to close with this last slide. Speaking of heroes, you know, one of my heroes, many people's heroes, male or female, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And one of the things with Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that, you know, she saw no limits. Talk about independence. And if you advance to the next slide, you'll see her at her confirmation hearing. And, you know, this is just, you know, so appropriate for us in these times that there's no reason for women, we should be at all those decisions. We should be at all the tables making decisions. And this is going to make those decisions stronger and better. And we as women have to understand having diversity at the table with us is going to make things stronger and better. So on that note, I am going to have the privilege of introducing Lauren Bigelow. And Lauren, speaking of heroes, Lauren is one of mine as well. And she has such a strong background. She's executive director at 20 Fathoms up in the Traverse City area. She is a lecturer at the Ross School of Business, CEO of Growth Capital Network. She's active in many boards, especially in the area of energy innovation, a main driver for her. So I've known her for many years now, and I couldn't be more proud to introduce you, Lauren.
Oh, I'm excited to take the mantle from you, MJ. So I'm gonna breeze through my career path, which is long, winding, and at best random. So I graduated from the University of Michigan a number of years ago with a degree in economics, thinking that, you know, I've got a real head for numbers. I'm really interested in this. I went into finance, where I was bored beyond what I knew what boredom could be. And so that you'll see this theme as we go on. I got headhunted because I was actually doing quite well in finance, but when the recruiter said, you know, would you like to sell fax machines or cell phones, which at that time were the size of a purse? I said no, but she said, would you like to work for a wine business? And so during my undergrad, I had developed a lot of acumen with wine, having worked at a Wine Spectator award-winning restaurant. So I ended up working for a corporate on the East Coast for their wine business, helping out their small distributors, and took that for a while. And my last professional position in wine was as the wine steward of the Parker Ranch Estate on the Big Island of Hawaii, which is fun, but not as fun as it seems. But in that time frame, I had a health crisis, and I really thought, you know, if I have a limited time on this earth, I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. And so created my first big career jump, and that was to archaeology. I spent a decade as a prehistoric archaeologist, working in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Alaska, and ended up with a PhD in anthropology. And so this was one of my first technologies. Those are bifaces. This is what archaeologists call a technological advance. Those are blades. There's about 500,000 years between the bifaces and the blades. So we're getting better at tech advances. This is what we call a project milestone. On the picture, I'm the one with the hat and the super long hair. And one of the things that I did when I was an archaeologist is that I learned a lot about data and research and what innovation looks like. I developed skills on project management, bootstrapping. Logistics in third world countries are insane. You know, working with teams, working with other cultures or skill sets. And so, you know, I love the teaching and the students and the research, but I don't really have the stomach for academic politics. So I pivoted back to business. While I was in my doctoral work, I was the director of a thing called the IT Zone. And that's the predecessor to today's Ann Arbor Spark. And this is really where I discovered that I enjoyed building community. And so I love the tech startups. I love the geeks that we dealt with. The atmosphere was electric, and it was a lot of fun. And we also were part of that .com boom and bust. And so I got to see the first build up and let down of technology companies. I went from there, I joined my first startup called the Clean Tech Group. I was managing director there for about 4.5 years. And we, along with some other groups in the country, created the thesis for early stage venture investment around clean energy and clean technologies. And definitely got my startup street cred there. We raised millions in venture. We opened 5 offices globally, but I also have a lot of scars from that time frame. You learn a lot with your first startup. It's great experience. But one of the things I missed is I really missed the research part of it. And so really started getting bored, started getting edgy, and was trying to figure out what was missing in my life. And I realized that it was the research scientist part. And so I joined a group in 2008 called New Energy Finance, and they did the top research globally around clean energy and technology. And not only did we raise money for that, but at the end of 2009, New Energy Finance was sold to Bloomberg Financial. At which point I came back to Michigan with 2 mandates for myself. A, I was going to finish that doctorate that I had been ABD for a decade, and B, I was going to start a company that I was going to work for myself. And so I learned a lot about startups. I learned a lot about working with other people. And when we started Growth Capital Network, it was really about early stage technology, but moving towards mezzanine debt, private equity, and structured finance. But it kept being pulled back into the startup world. I ended up creating and running Accelerate Michigan, which was globally the first $1 million business competition, the Green Tech Entrepreneur Academy, which helped folks in scientists in universities move their technology from commercialized into businesses. I did a lot of work with the translational research and commercialization program. So really dug in. Also found a niche with funders on the philanthropic side who were pulling together money to fund innovation programs all across Detroit, all across southeastern Michigan. So the team at Growth Capital Network still works with the New Economy Initiative out of Detroit. It's a $165 million initiative, putting money into ecosystems, small business, and entrepreneurship. So those have been like fantastic experiences of mine. But one of the things in particular with Accelerate Michigan that I really honed is that for me, it's not about technology, it's about innovation. So the last check for Accelerate Michigan that I handed was to a chickpea pasta company called Bonza that was not tech, but very innovative and have been incredibly successful in their journey. So, what does this meandering and random career path teach me? It taught me really to reframe a lot of my thinking. The job market is so very different than when I started, and it's going to be for all of us. So for me, I think of it as skill sets and not a career path. I'm clearly not a linear person. And when I move from position to position, I really look at what I'm bringing to the job, what I want to develop within myself. Am I moving to a new industry? Am I taking on new responsibilities? Is this a new type of position? Do I want to be a manager here or a team member? Is it customer facing, internal facing? I'm always looking for the next thing to grow myself, to be innovative. Like, where can I be creative in a company? Where can I be creative in a nonprofit? And as other people have mentioned, there's so much around network. And I think people do a lot of lip service around networking, but it's so much about showing up. It's so much around engaging. And I think the stories from Ariella, Margarita, and MJ are very much around what these networks have done for us. And honestly, if you get fatigued with it, I'll be at conferences that I'll play a game with myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to every human being with a red tie, or energy conferences or finance conferences, because they're so male dominated. I'm like, I'm going to talk to every woman in the room. And after you make it through your first couple folks, it's really, you're kind of warmed up and you're there. If you find by that point that you're not, then it is probably time to go home. Cultivating resilience and humor. You got to find those things that you think are fun and try to fit them in as much as possible. If you can do that in your job and your work and your daily, that's a fantastic thing to do. The one thing that you'll realize as you move forward in your career is really taking risks gets a lot easier. Making those difficult choices gets more seamless. You hesitate less, you get used to the discomfort. And honestly, if you're interested in doing tech entrepreneurship, you're going to forge into a territory that you are creating. There is no map. There is barely a compass. So you're going to go through periods of discomfort every time you do a startup, in every situation. And I have never seen an exception. As Ariella was saying, it's 95% perspiration and 5% luck. But there's no path here that's easy, but it's incredibly rewarding. I think basically our Seek Out mentors, we've chatted enough about this, but these are for the women. And I do have some men that I mentor that just really mean the world to me. And with mentorship, I get as much from them as I think I give to them. My goal overall, in terms of who I'm working with and for, is that whoever hired me looks super smart. I put my all into my jobs, And I know it's difficult when you're younger, but I love big, thorny challenges. And Harvard studies have said that the happiest people are those who really deal with difficult work. And so, don't shy away from stepping up. And success isn't determined by how many times you win. It's really about like how you show up the week after you lose. Also, this has been touched, and I got a good shot on that RBG too, MJ. Bringing value to your community. Anyone who looks at my LinkedIn, I'm board chair of a couple organizations. I participate in a lot other. Volunteer where your passion is. Most of my contracts that I've had over the last 20 years have been referrals. I don't have to go look for things. A lot of things come to me. And so people who know me, know my work ethic, know the quality of my work. And so I think that being a true professional in your chosen vertical, whether it's biotech or IT, is wonderful, but being able to bring your whole person to that job because you're doing volunteer work outside of that job, I think is also quite valuable. I have some golden rules. One of my favorite is don't take criticism from people you wouldn't go to for advice. I'm going to lose that screen. But create your own, live by these golden rules and shift them as you need to. As you move in and out of your career, you're going to grow. And so some of the stuff that you have that's relevant early is not going to be further on down your path. But with that, I'm going to hand it back to Margarita.
Thanks, Lauren. And these were awesome stories, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing. To the audience, we are going to be running a little bit over. We understand if you need to leave. If not, you are more than welcome to stay and enjoy the next part of our fireside chat. We'll be going into our discussion point. So I'm going to have our panelists unmute themselves and bring up their videos. This next part, while I'm asking questions, don't mute yourself. It's more just feeling like we're having a normal conversation between us. And then I encourage attendees, if you would like to submit any of your questions through the chat, you're more than welcome to. I'm gonna go ahead and jump in though. So Lauren, you definitely have surprised me with so many of different stories. And I know I'm gonna open this up to all the panelists, but for either of you, have you ever experienced a gender bias situation or a microaggression? And how did you handle that? How did you feel about it?
How I felt about it and how I dealt with it were definitely two different things. There are times that you end up in a situation, and I should say I do have an inner New Yorker. I was born and bred there, so a lot of times my immediate reaction breaks down into 2 words and 1 finger. But for the professional side of life, you have to look at it as the context of where you're at. Are you in a board meeting? Where is this microaggression coming from? How can you deal with it in a way that you can't be put into a situation where you're being kind of trapped into a trope? So a lot of times I will subtly call people out on it. I will ask them, if there's something that I heard, I'm like, I'm really sorry. Could you repeat that? Could you unpack that? How is it that that you came to that conclusion? And so I won't go full frontal, which is honestly, that's my knee-jerk reaction. But I will go sideways to have them address the comment. And so I don't typically let things fly.
That's a good tidbit of advice there. Thank you for sharing.
If I can just say one more word to follow up on that.
Sure, shoot.
It's awesome. I totally agree with you. And not even only aggressions, whenever I don't know what to answer or I find myself in a difficult situation, instead of answering or responding, I just ask a question. And I think, why do you feel this way? Or could you explain? Or do you have some facts to support your arguments? And often, most times, people just cannot say anything and they find themselves like, oh, actually, I don't know, it's just me being an asshole. And it's so wonderful. So instead of, I think, just go back, ask a question back, and it's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the most common ones that I've you know, I think we all have experienced, and we, you know, I think we'll continue to experience, is the right to be heard, right? And so people speaking over us, people trying to get that spotlight and being very aggressive about it. That is, whether you call it gender aggression or not, it's there, right? And, you know, how do you get your voice heard? And depends on, as Lauren was saying, on the situation. And there's the sideways angle of making sure that, hey, let me finish. And how do you do that in a way that people will listen to you, not just remember you said, hey, let me finish. And then really recruiting people ahead of time to make sure that they are stepping in and assisting you. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. And getting help and support can only help others get help and support.
Thank you. I'll agree with all of what you're saying. Just being in the ecosystem myself, starting younger in my career, I have found and had honest conversations even with some of my own friends who didn't start off as my friends, as just being, sometimes even the way that I'm coming off is intimidating, or it just can be kind of scary. And so most of the time, even when someone does say something to me and let's talk about that and let's unpack it, it's more of sometimes just their feelings to begin with. And so being patient with someone else while it is happening can sometimes go further and be beneficial towards bridging and making sure that the relationship stays strong, especially if you're having to continue to work and have a professional relationship with this person. All right. Are we good? I'm going to continue on with questions though. All right, so one that we had sent very early on by a registrant is, what recommendations or actionable advice do you have for women who are interested in advancing their careers into senior leadership positions?
I can take this one, and then probably somebody more experienced will follow up. I actually think that, you know, we look at ourselves and thinking, oh my God, how can I actually go and ask for this position? But I think as managers, we actually look for these people. I think we forget that managers need good people. Personnel is the key of any organization. So I think, you know, one thing, if you don't feel that you can just go and suggest yourself, you should find an advocate for yourself who would go and introduce you or suggest your candidacy for a position that you're interested in.
Lauren, what about you?
I also think that, you know, making your intentions known, letting people know what you're interested in doing, talking to your mentors or people within your company about, you know, where you want to be professionally in 18 to 24 months. They might not put you on projects because they don't recognize that those are the skill sets you want to obtain. They might have different perceptions of you. So I think that constant dialogue with people about what you bring to the table and what you want to achieve over the next kind of 18 to 36 months in your career, I think are really important.
Yeah, making sure your voice is heard is absolutely on Lauren for sure. And that, and both Ariel and Lauren talked about that perseverance and hard work, because letting people know what it is you want to do and showing that you can do that are important things.
Thank you. I don't know if I actually have much to contribute towards that because I'm still navigating it myself.
Oh, we're still all navigating it. Let's be clear.
It's a constant growing thing.
It doesn't end.
All right, so I'm going to actually ask another question. This one came up quite popular, is how do you gracefully speak up about gender bias to either your teams or your organization? MJ, do you have any experience in this?
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, there's two sides of that. One is, as a leader in an organization, it is absolutely up to you to make sure you have a diverse workforce and people that you are working with across the board. Because if you're not walking the walk, you can't expect others to do it. So that's, you know, the one thing. And the other is, you know, when you're talking to organizations, there's nothing wrong with asking, So, how do you handle different diversity? And you don't have to focus on just women, but women are, clearly a piece of that. And how do you handle pay, equity in salaries? How do you handle promotions and such? And those are valid questions in this day and age.
Okay. Those are all really relevant points. Yeah. Ariella, did you have anything that you wanted to share? This one's a hard one for me.
It's
yeah.
so hard. So what I did once, and it was when this whole issue of shooting on Black Lives Matter came up, and I'm not as articulate about these kind of topics. So I found my very good colleague, he gave a whole lecture on that. So I just took his lecture with his recording and I played it to my group, and we just sat down and everybody had an opportunity to reflect on this. So I think similar, just bringing my group together and just telling them that I'm open to hear their ideas and their feelings about difficult topics was helpful to me. And I felt like I did something.
You did do something. You opened yourself up and allowed them to be able to express their feelings. I mean, I'm not always the most graceful person when approaching certain topics, but I mean, you still gave them that opportunity and to kind of feel and connect on those emotions and share. So I still think you did awesome.
Yeah. We did a training for our team and our board. And I think one of the principal pieces that comes out of it, and as Ariella brought up BLM, is that we are navigating times that vernacular is changing and people can be fairly sensitive. And so you got to forgive folks as they're learning for stepping in it. And you have to be respectful when they do and understand that they can change. We can shift opinions. We can shift, when I got out of school and was looking for jobs, I mean, most women were teachers or secretaries. I mean, based on the clear cutting that the women before me did, I had an easier time, and then it just moves forward. But having those conversations spark a lot of additional conversations and awareness.
Okay. All right. I think we have time for one more question with that. And I wanted to ask advice from either of you. We've covered a lot of different topics, navigating even scary, risky career jumps, microaggressions and whatnot. If there's any pieces of advice, tips, toolbox pieces that you want to give, maybe something, a tidbit from mentoring, what would you share?
For me, the mentoring aspect is fundamental to success in business. I don't care male or female or what you how you view the world, and mentoring, looking to those people who can help us. But if we're not out there mentoring ourselves, I don't care where you are in your career, you can be mentoring somebody. Margarita, you were talking about mentoring and some of the stuff that you were doing. Lauren was talking about her mentoring. There's a range of mentoring we all should be doing, and once again, leading by example is to me the critical piece of that.
Thank you, MJ. Ariella?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Lauren, go ahead.
I was just saying, if you want this world to be a better place, then contribute to it. What you can bring to the table, what connections you can make, what energy you can provide another person or support for somebody either going through a tough time with their business or they're trying to keep their business up during a traumatic life experience. I mean, if you can, then do, because ultimately that comes back to you in some format. So I think it's really about the community of women in technology, the community of women in startups, really lifting each other up.
I concur with you, Lauren. I'll also add this tidbit because it just more recently happened to me. I do mentor students alike. And one thing I did learn more recently is sometimes I get approached by a student and they're like, hey, can I sit down and chat with you? And I don't connect with this person at all. But this person taught me a lot more actually about how to be a mentee and other things that I just never really thought of. And so it became a very different aspect of picking mentees that are very different from me to teach me an entirely different way of culture. But, you know, just like coding, for example, that's not something I'm normally rehearsed in, but just teaching me something else. And that exchange between us both actually was just very beneficial. And I'm hoping to just kind of share, don't always pick your mentors, mentees that look like you. Go look for diversity, find things that maybe you don't quite have and learn from them.
Yeah, and just like one thing to add, I do think that mentoring young people is absolutely the most rewarding thing possible. So when you see them grow and graduate and go into the big world and then come back to you and tell them about their mentorship experiences, I think it's incredible. When I mentor young people, I think the most two shocking things for them is when I tell them not to take things personally, because we usually do, and it's so difficult not to, but when they actually learn how to not take things personally, criticism, rejection, but kind of understand that it just wasn't a good match. And in most cases, it is not a good match. And also build on criticism. I think this was at least the most helpful tips that I learned as a mentee, and I try to give back as a mentor.
Thank you. Okay, I know we are running late for time here, but is there any other last words, ladies, that you would like to share with the audience at this point?
No, thank you for the opportunity for this conversation.
No, thank you all very, very much for your time, your patience, your words of wisdom, and sharing your stories. This was phenomenal. Thank you. All right, so I'll have you all, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and actually share my screen for this last bit as we close up. And for you out in the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Sorry we ran a little bit late, but these women are out in our ecosystem. You can get in touch with them. And lastly, please, please go and look at the other events that are happening from a2Tech360.com. There's still quite a few events that are happening today, tomorrow, all the way through Friday being the biggest day. And thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day and week. We'll see you later.